Rise of the European Emperor by Taishang Laonyo.
Chapter 511, Conquering Wittenberg, Part 2. Of course, Marin's army did not really do nothing. At the same time as the truce, Marin sent a large number of troops to assist the soldiers of Hamburg, and began to capture the inland shipping sailors and their families of Wittenberg in the fishing villages along the Elbe River near Wittenberg. After being caught, all these inland shipping sailors were packed and shipped to Hamburg by the Hamburg people. In order to cut off the possibility of the resurgence of the shipping industry in the electorate of Saxony in the future, the Hamburg people directly captured all the teenagers in the fishing village, leaving no fire for the electorate of Saxony. However, the Hamburg army and Marin's army mainly operated near Wittenberg, and looted the fishing villages near Wittenberg. Therefore, they could only capture some of the shipping sailors of Wittenberg. But this also dealt a huge blow to the electorate of Saxony. Because the largest inland shipping port in the electorate of Saxony is Wittenberg. Most of its inland shipping ships are also close to this side. In the previous war, if it weren't for the Brandenburg army and the Swiss mercenaries, the soldiers of the electorate of Saxony could have taken a boat north along the Elbe River and directly attacked Hamburg. Marin's men and the army of Hamburg attacked the port of Wittenberg and seized most of the inland ships. At the same time, they looted all the nearby fishing villages and captured a large number of inland shipping sailors. Although this is not all of the electorate of Saxony, it accounts for at least half of it. After this, the inland shipping of the electorate of Saxony must have suffered a heavy blow. In addition, Marin also divided some troops to loot the small towns near Wittenberg. Ordinary towns have no city walls, and Marin's army can go there and start looting directly. Baron Lerick, the special envoy of the imperial parliament, would see East Frisian soldiers who went to loot local towns and villages every day when he entered and exited Marin's barracks, pulling a large amount of looted supplies back to the barracks with carts. Baron Lerick was not surprised by this, because this was normal. Baron Lerick would be suspicious if Marin's army did nothing and stayed in the barracks. Why? This is the convention of this era. As the saying goes, thieves never leave empty-handed. By the same token, those mercenaries who attack a place will not return empty-handed. Marin showed a gesture of giving up the attack on Wittenberg, but if he did not let his soldiers rob the villages near Wittenberg, Baron Lerick would be suspicious and wonder if Marin was unwilling to give up. However, Marin began to let his soldiers rob nearby towns and villages, which made Baron Lerick feel relieved. Because Marin began to let his soldiers rob, indicating that Marin had no intention of continuing to besiege Wittenberg. These robberies can be regarded as an act of making a fortune before retreating, which is normal. For this, Marin also exhausted his mind. When he was in college in his previous life, Marin also took psychology as an elective. Although he did not study it seriously, it is enough to figure out the thoughts of people in this era. In order to confuse the enemy, Marin specially arranged his men to rob property and livestock in nearby towns and villages, making a gesture of making a fortune before retreating, for the Saxons to see. Baron Lerick was relieved after seeing the actions of Marin's army, and brought the news back to Wittenberg and told John, who stayed behind. After hearing this, John also judged that Marin's army had indeed given up the siege of Wittenberg. So John relaxed his vigilance. Specifically, the defense in the middle of the night became lax. In particular, the number of sentries in the middle of the night on the wall section facing the Elbe River in the south of Wittenberg decreased a lot. That night, Saul's scouts felt different. So, Saul quickly reported to Marin. "Master, their defense in the middle of the night was indeed much lax. So, shall we start tonight?" Marin thought for a while and said, "Wait a little longer. Although the other party has relaxed their guard tonight, I guess their nerves are still tense. If there is any disturbance, there will still be a quick reaction." Just like that, after waiting for another 3 days, when the defenders of Wittenberg were completely relieved, Marin called Cage. Oh no, now it should be called Nicholas Cage. Cage. "Oh no, Nicholas, are you ready?" Obviously, Marin was going to use Cage's flying claws again. "Always be prepared and listen to your call." Cage said loudly. "Very good, it depends on you tonight. At midnight, the flying claws will climb the city from the south river wall, then open the southeast gate and let the army into the city. Yes, guarantee to complete the task." That afternoon, after sending off Baron Lerick, who came to Marin's barracks to inquire about the news on a daily basis, Marin immediately ordered dinner. Moreover, he ordered the soldiers to rest immediately after dinner, to conserve their energy and wait for the attack in the middle of the night. After resting for a few hours, at about 9 o'clock in the evening, the soldiers were all awakened, and began to check their equipment, and then began to assemble. After the assembly, Marin led the army and quietly marched towards the southeast gate of Wittenberg several kilometers away. In the middle of the night, using the mature tactics of conquering Copenhagen, Nicholas Cage led his special forces and quietly climbed the wall facing the river on the south side of Wittenberg. Then, the old trick was repeated, and the rope of the claw hook was tied to the inside of the wall. Finally, they crossed the streets and rushed straight to the inside of the southeast gate of Wittenberg. Because they determined that Marin's army would not attack the city, the Saxon defenders were very relaxed these days. In the middle of the night of the first day, John did make some preparations. But Marin did not send anyone to launch an attack that night. Therefore, the Saxons' final preparations did not work until Marin's army really came. After easily dealing with more than 200 defenders inside the southeast gate of Wittenberg, Cage and his special forces began to clean up some thick logs on the inside of the gate that were against the gate. After Cage and his men cleared the debris inside the gate and opened the big iron gate in the southeast, the Saxon army in the city reacted. Unfortunately, it was too late. When they sent people to reinforce the southeast gate, the main force of the East Frisian army had already poured into the city from the southeast gate. Speaking of which, if the defenders in the city had more than 10,000 veterans of Saxony before the troops were dispatched, they might be able to take advantage of the fact that there were not many East Frisian troops pouring into the gate to drive out the enemy's vanguard and close the gate again. However, at this moment, the Saxon defenders in the city only had 3,000 regular troops, and the other 8,000 were militiamen who were temporarily recruited. Those militiamen, relying on the tall and solid walls to defend the city, could still fight. But without the support of the city walls, they were no match for the regular army. Therefore, the 2,000 Saxon militiamen who came to reinforce the southeast gate were quickly defeated by the East Frisian army that broke into the city. Moreover, militiamen are militiamen, and their reaction speed is too slow. By the time they sent people to reinforce the southeast gate, it was too late. Afterwards, more East Frisian troops poured into the city and launched an attack in the direction of the Wittenberg Palace. Because, according to the newly captured prisoners of war, most of Wittenberg's regular troops and John's family are at the Wittenberg Palace. I'm so sleepy, it seems that the 19th National Congress will be held today, Long live the party state. The Supreme Launyo salutes the big guys. Then, give me a chance to serve the party state. Chapter 5:12, The Demolition of Wittenberg. Along the way, Marin's army did not encounter too much fierce resistance. This was mainly because most of the troops in the city at this time were militias, and a head-on confrontation was not the opponent of Marin's regular army. Moreover, these militias had not been trained for overnight battles at all. After the city was broken in the middle of the night, it was good that they did not collapse on their own. Where would they have the confidence and courage to resist? In this way, Marin led the army and successfully arrived outside the Wittenberg Palace. Here, Marin encountered much more intense resistance. After all, there are more than 2,000 regular troops in the inner city of the palace. Under the illumination of torches, the only remaining regular troops of the electorate of Saxony showed enough courage and good discipline. But, it's useless. Because the number of people is too large. And the palace of Wittenberg, unlike the city gate, is still an oak gate. What should I do with the oak gate? Of course, let Dong Tsunrui. Oh no, it was Doni Tsrui who went up to blow up the door. The members of the demolition team under Doni Tsrui, with the dismantled wooden door on their heads, broke through to the gate of the Wittenberg Palace, pried open the stone slabs in front of the gate with a chisel, and then started digging a hole. After digging the hole, bury the gunpowder barrel in the hole, cover it with soil and stone slabs, then light the fuse, and run away. With a loud bang, the gate of the Wittenberg Palace was blown open, and Marin's army broke through. Leading the charge were the 250 muscle sticks of the Wolf-Fong Commando, led by Kahn. They all wore full sets of plate armor, held maces, and rushed into the Wittenberg Palace with their teeth and claws, bringing huge casualties and fear to the defenders in the palace. Under their impact, the defense line in the Wittenberg Palace was quickly broken. Then, John had no choice but to surrender with everyone. Next, Marin and his men first disarmed all the soldiers in the city, and centralized and placed the surrendered soldiers under custody. At the same time, Marin sent out part of the army, and with the help of the guide party, controlled the mansions of all the senior nobles in Wittenberg, captured the Saxon nobles, and disarmed the guards of those nobles. After doing all this, the next step was naturally to loot the whole city. Marin hated Frederick III's little tricks very much, so he decided to loot Wittenberg this time. Because Marin was very determined to loot this time, in Marin's mind, this looting was comparable to the demolition of later generations. What is the difference between looting and demolition? Looting is just looking for some valuables to rob. And the looting at the demolition level not only robs property, but also causes damage. For example, when the British and French forces looted the old summer palace, they would use axes to split the furniture inlaid with gems in order to remove the inlaid gems. Some gold or copper carvings were savagely removed from the statues. The most famous of these is the 12 zodiac animal heads in the old summer palace. The animal heads are copper heads and stone bodies, and the workmanship is extremely exquisite. For the invaders, they obviously couldn't move the stone bodies. So, they broke off 12 copper animal heads like a bear breaking a stick and took them away. In the end, the British and French forces also set a fire in the old summer palace to cover up the traces. The above is the demolition-style looting, which is the measure that Marin intends to use against Wittenberg. Frederick III really offended Marin, so Marin naturally would not be polite to him. Due to time constraints, Marin may not have the opportunity to loot more than 20 other cities in the electorate of Saxony. However, looting Wittenberg is enough. Because Wittenberg is the richest city in the electorate of Saxony. After all, the Wettin family concentrated a lot of wealth from the electorate of Saxony. However, this also facilitated Marin's looting. When Marin was arranging the demolition, Baron Lerick, a representative of the imperial parliament, rushed over angrily and questioned Marin. "Duke Marin, why did you attack Wittenberg? The imperial parliament has decided on the negotiations." Marin was a little too lazy to pay attention to him, and said without raising his head. "Yes, the imperial parliament only decided on the negotiations, but hasn't the peace talks started yet? In the absence of peace talks, we are still in a state of war. Is there a problem for me to capture Wittenberg?" Baron Lerick was speechless, and he continued to question with a red face. "Then why were you so obedient before and took the initiative to withdraw your troops? We thought you really wanted to negotiate." This. Marin thought about it and smiled at Lerick. "Actually, I was just teasing you, but you took it seriously." Lerick was furious and wanted to beat Marin. But after looking at the soldiers under Marin who were surrounded by swords and guns, he still held back, and then returned to the house in the city for receiving foreign guests with a red face. After Lerick left, Marin continued to order his men to do things. This time, because it was a violent demolition, Marin directly appointed the violent muscle man, Khan, as the demolition captain, and let him be responsible for looting valuable property in the city. According to Marin's requirements, in the city of Wittenberg, except for the things of the Catholic Church and the diplomatic hotel that symbolizes diplomacy, all other places can be robbed. Of course, in order to leave some dignity for those nobles, their silk clothes cannot be taken off. As for the gold and silver jewelry on the noble women, if you see it, it will naturally be taken off. But if someone hides the jewelry in the private parts of the body, if it is not obvious, forget it. The violent muscle man Khan was extremely excited after receiving the task. He also took 250 of the wolf commandos who were handy to participate in the demolition. Khan first sent people to rob the treasury of the Wittenberg palace, and then began to target all the gold and silver items in the palace, such as the knives and forks made of gold and silver, as well as wine glasses. At noon, John was having dinner with his family in the palace. Unexpectedly, Khan broke into the restaurant with a group of wolf commandos. "What are you doing?" John asked nervously. Looking at the murderous Khan, John thought Khan was here to kill him, and he was so scared that he wanted to pee. But Khan didn't even look at him, he stared at the gold plates and knives and forks that John was using. Then, Khan rushed up aggressively and took away all the gold plates and knives and forks that John was using for dinner. Then, he replaced John with ceramic tableware. John watched Khan tremblingly in the restaurant looting gold and silver tableware, and did not dare to resist. After all, Khan and his men were so big that their arms were thicker than John's legs. Originally, John thought Khan would just take away all the gold and silver tableware, but unexpectedly, before leaving, Khan suddenly stared at John and couldn't move his eyes away. What are you going to do again? John was about to cry. Sir John, please stand up. This chair seems to be inlaid with gold. Right? John looked back, isn't it? As the chair that the heir to the elector sat on for dinner, it was indeed inlaid with a lot of gold. No wonder Khan liked it. In this living room, the chairs used by Frederick III and John for dinner were mainly inlaid with gold. In desperation, John, who didn't want to be beaten, had to stand up and change to an ordinary chair. Then, Khan took 2 chairs inlaid with gold to the door and smashed them violently. In the end, Khan took the gold from the smashed chairs and took it away, leaving only a mess on the ground. At the end of the day, Khan led the demolition team to dismantle all the gold and silver items in the Wittenberg Palace. He smashed the furniture inlaid with furniture and the stone sculptures inlaid with stone sculptures. It was extremely barbaric and very violent. The only civilized thing that was better than what the British and French forces did in the old summer palace was that Khan didn't set a fire to burn down the Wittenberg Palace at the end. After demolishing the Wittenberg Palace, Khan, according to Marin's order, led his demolition team to the mansions of the great nobles of the electorate of Saxony and continued to carry out demolition-style looting. It's really depressing. Although I support the leadership of, what does the conference have to do with our private enterprises? I was asked to learn the spirit and write my reflections. For a moment, I almost thought I was a glorious civil servant. I spent most of the night on this, and can only update once today. Chapter 5:13, Great Fortune. This horrific demolition lasted for half a month, and the prosperous Wittenberg was demolished into pieces. Of course, Marin was still conscientious. After the demolition, Wittenberg was not burned down. However, the European architectural structure is different from that of ancient China. The main structure of the old summer palace is a wooden house, which is naturally very easy to catch fire. Most European houses are stone houses, so it is not easy to burn them. This situation often occurs. The wooden floor and furniture inside the stone house are burned, but the main body of the house is fine. Because the main body of the house is stone. Although it was burned black by the fire, it just stood firm. Although there was no fire, Wittenberg was also tossed around at this time. Khan was originally a violent maniac, and the demolition was naturally violent. Marin saw many times that in order to remove the gold and silver inlaid on chairs and other furniture, Khan raised his 2-handed axe without saying a word and jumped at the furniture. After breaking it apart, he asked his men to pick off the gold and silver decorations. It was so rough. Fortunately, European nobles did not pay attention to using precious woods such as red sandalwood or wanwali like ancient China. Generally, furniture was made of oak and pine. Therefore, the furniture itself was not valuable, except for the gold and silver decorations on it. Therefore, those furniture that were not inlaid with gold and silver were preserved. Otherwise, if it was made of precious woods such as red sandalwood and wanwali in China, it might be emptied. By then, those nobles might not even have a chair or a bed left. Because the demolition was too thorough, Khan's demolition team harvested too many supplies. In addition to those gold coins, gold and silver utensils, Khan and his men removed many bronze statues. What embarrassed the heir of the Elector of Saxony the most was that Khan had taken away the bronze statue of Frederick III. As a very capable and prestigious Elector of Saxony, Frederick III was naturally quite popular. So, Frederick III's men, together with those Saxon Hansa merchants, collectively made a bronze statue and erected it in the royal palace of Wittenberg. Unexpectedly, this statue was used hundreds of pounds of copper and looked very valuable, so it was favored by Khan. Khan personally took action and broke the stone base with a sledgehammer, and then carried the 600 or 700-pound bronze man away by himself. John originally planned to protest, but when he saw Khan carrying the 600 or 700-pound bronze man by himself, he was shocked and stood there, forgetting to protest to Khan, the pervert. Of course, he didn't have the courage to provoke a peerless villain like Khan. In addition to the Nashi gold, silver and bronze wares, Khan and others also moved away many precious statues according to instructions. And a large number of oil paintings collected in royal palaces and noble mansions. The level of paintings that can be collected by the royal family and the great nobles must be not low. Moreover, many of these are oil paintings handed down by the nobles, which are the only basis for the descendants to remember their ancestors, and many of them are treasures. To a certain extent, these oil paintings that preserve the appearance of the ancestors are similar to the tablets of Oriental people. For those European nobles who value the glory of family inheritance, the importance of these oil paintings is no less than that of tablets. The oil paintings of several generations of ancestors of the Wettin family were directly snatched away by Con, which made John so angry that he almost fainted. However, Marin also told John want the oil paintings of ancestors. Sure, talk about it during the negotiation, and exchange it with something. Because too many artworks were robbed, especially those bulky sculptures, this made Con's demolition results extremely amazing. If it were in an ordinary inland city, so many things might not be transported away. But what is Wittenberg? That is an important port in the middle reaches of the Elbe River. So, Marin can use Hamburg's inland ships to pull all the materials and artworks on the ship back to East Frisia. If it were a horse-drawn carriage, Marin might not be able to pull away so many things. But with the help of a large number of Hamburg's inland ships, it is much easier to transport these fruits of demolition. Under the knife and gun coercion of the East Frisian army, the farmers near Wittenberg honestly carried the looted property in Wittenberg to the riverside dock outside the city of Wittenberg and loaded it on the ship and shipped it away. According to the evaluation of the professional auctioneer on the ship in Hamburg, the total value of the property looted by the East Frisian army from Wittenberg this time is as high as more than 2 million golden gold coins. Of course, this refers to the property and food removed by the demolition team, not counting the gold and silver coins and gold and silver ornaments seized by Marin. Mainly, gold and silver coins and ornaments are very valuable materials. Moreover, gold and silver do not take up much space, so Marin can let his men load them up with a carriage and take them away. As for those shipped back, most of them are actually bulky and difficult to carry. In fact, in this robbery, Marin only looted gold and silver coins worth 300,000 golden gold coins from the palace and the treasury, which is not a lot. Of course, in this era, nobles who can take out 300,000 gold coins in cash are all local tyrants. Even Marin is at this level. Because most of Marin's wealth is food, which is not discounted. When you need money, you need to sell food. However, copying the houses of the nobles and merchants in Wittenberg gave Marin a huge surprise. Because Con's demolition team copied gold and silver coins worth 800,000 gold coins. It's no wonder that the European banking industry has not yet emerged in this year, and these nobles and merchants have no place to save money. Of course, it's best to have a bank. Marin directly sent troops to copy the bank vault, which is more direct. In this era, European nobles and merchants also had the habit of keeping a lot of money at home. Only some nobles and merchants were involved in the lending business and took some of their money out for usury, but most of the nobles and merchants' funds were still kept at home. So, this is a bargain for Marin. The wealth accumulated by some families for generations was directly robbed by Con and his demolition team. In addition, the gold, silver and jewelry that Con and his demolition team forcibly picked off from the furniture and statues were roughly estimated to be worth 500,000 gold coins. In general, the total value of gold, silver and jewelry alone in the looting of Wittenberg exceeded 1.6 million golden gold coins. Counting the baggage and property valued at 2 million golden gold coins, Marin's profit from the looting of Wittenberg was as high as 3.6 million golden gold coins, which was absolutely a super profit. Of course, Marin also had to reward his men for conquering Wittenberg. Therefore, Marin planned to take out 400,000 gold coins, property to reward his men. Cash and gold, silver and jewelry can do a lot of things, and Marin was reluctant to share them with the soldiers. Of course, it's not that he didn't give any cash. Marin's decision was to take out 100,000 gold coins worth of cash, mainly small silver coins of low value and not very convenient to transport, and distribute them to his men. In addition, after returning, he sold 300,000 gold coins worth of property and distributed them to the soldiers according to their merits. In this way, Marin can still keep 1 million golden gold coins worth of cash, 500,000 gold coins worth of gold, silver and jewelry, and 1.7 million gold coins worth of various property. Anyway, Marin made a fortune. In fact, Marin never dreamed that looting Wittenberg would have such a big harvest. But this is no wonder, after all, the Saxony business circle is the second largest business circle in the Hanseatic League. There are more than 20 cities in the electorate of Saxony alone, most of which are well developed in business. As the capital and economic center of the prosperous electorate of Saxony, it seems not surprising that Wittenberg has so many properties. No. Marin was originally immersed in excitement, but suddenly he slapped his thigh and stood up. Why? Because Marin remembered that he had reached an agreement with Lübeck and Hamburg before. All the money would be divided equally among the three parties. So, this means that the proceeds from Marin's looting of Wittenberg this time should be divided equally among the three parties. No wonder Hamburg sent a professional auctioneer on board. It turned out that he was here to count the property in preparation for the future division. Marin suddenly realized. However, Marin only exposed the baggage and property to the Hamburg auctioneer. The people of Hamburg did not know about those gold and silver coins and gold and silver jewelry. So, Marin came up with a plan and decided to conceal the number of gold and silver coins and gold and silver jewelry. In the end, Marin decided to tell Lübeck and Hamburg that they only robbed 400,000 gold coins and gold and silver jewelry worth 200,000 gold coins. This number is absolutely reasonable in ordinary cities. In fact, so much wealth cannot be robbed in most cities. But who said that Saxony has developed business? Marin gave such data entirely because Saxony's business was too developed and it was not easy to conceal too much gain. In another agricultural vassal capital, Marin could easily report that he had only robbed 100,000 gold coins worth of gold and silver coins and 50,000 gold coins worth of gold and silver jewelry, and it would be reasonable and no one would doubt it. In this way, after looting Wittenberg, Marin directly concealed 600,000 gold coins worth of gold and silver coins and 300,000 gold coins worth of gold and silver jewelry. As for the other gold coins and jewelry that will be shared equally with Lübeck and Hamburg, Marin can also share 200,000 gold coins worth of gold and silver coins and gold and silver jewelry. In total, apart from the 100,000 gold coins worth of Finny silver coins to be issued to the soldiers, Marin will get a total of 1.1 million gold coins worth of gold and silver coins and gold and silver jewelry. Even for the property worth 2 million golden gold coins that has been loaded on the ship, Marin also sent people to declare to the Hamburg auctioneers that there are 300,000 gold coins worth of property, which is promised to the soldiers. This is also the practice of this era. When mercenaries capture a city, they must rob it. Only Marin's army has good military discipline, and no soldiers dare to rob privately. However, Marin will not give less of the property promised to them. Because these soldiers will be more motivated when attacking the city in the future. Moreover, this is also in line with the current practice. In this way, the baggage and property worth 2 million gold coins that have been loaded on the ship can be deducted from the property worth 300,000 gold coins, and the remaining property worth 1.7 million gold coins will be divided equally among the three parties. In the end, Marin will get property worth 566,000 gold coins. Marin took out a pen and paper, calculated carefully, and finally found to his surprise that, apart from the rewards given to the soldiers, he could actually get gold and silver coins, gold and silver jewelry and baggage and property worth a total of 1.666 million golden gold coins. It can be said that this conquest of Wittenberg is definitely a big deal. Depressed, the data cable connecting the computer to the monitor is broken, and I thought it was the computer that broke last night. I borrowed a data cable from someone early in the morning and hurriedly completed this update. Fortunately, it doesn't cost much to buy a data cable. If the computer breaks down, not only will the repair cost be expensive, but it will also affect the update in the evening. Well, I have to catch the bus too. I hope I can stand next to the beauty on the bus. Chapter 5:14, The Saxon Threat. Although this part of the money sent to Worms to bribe various princes must be offset, it is only a few 100,000 gold coins at most, which is absolutely a world of difference compared to the income of 1.666 million gold coins. However, when thinking of the secret letter from Hermann IV, Marin still had a shadow in his heart while being happy. This shadow is the speech of Frederick III at the Imperial Conference, emphasizing the threat of Marin to the princes. If it is summarized in the words of later generations, it is the Marin threat theory. This argument does not consider whether the object of the smear is peace-loving or not. Its argument is that if you have strong power, or are about to have strong power, you are a threat, a huge threat to world peace. In later generations, poor China has long been troubled by this unfounded and unreasonable China threat theory. The West, led by the United States, ignores China's peace-loving character. They believe that as long as the Chinese have a strong armed force, China will pose a serious threat to world peace. What the hell? The overall military strength of Europe and the United States is stronger than that of China, so why doesn't anyone talk about the European and American threat theory? Especially the United States, who fan the flames all over the world all day long, is a real troublemaker for world peace, but no one talks about the American threat theory. Of course, this is related to the fact that the United States has the right to speak in the world. The allies of the United States are all European powers, or developed countries such as the Japanese and the Koreans. These countries have a lot of say in the world, and the United States is the black boss, so everyone naturally advocates the justice of the United States. And those who don't get along with the United States are naturally smeared as evil. And what about China? There are no allies at all. There is only one country in the surrounding area that has a good relationship with Pakistan, and another is a small and weak country like Laos and Cambodia that has little presence. As for North Korea, they are the younger brother of the Russians and don't take China seriously at all. In addition to these surrounding countries, there are the black uncle allies in Africa. However, those black uncle allies only have some effect in the UN General Assembly votes. Usually, they have no right to speak at all. Under such circumstances, China, which is like a dove of peace, is described as a monster. And the old Americans, who were originally fierce falcons, were disguised as doves of peace, just like the cartoon that satirized the old Americans during World War I. Marin didn't want to mention the right and wrong of the previous life, but Marin knew that sometimes, propaganda is very, very important. Why does Frederick III have such a big voice? Isn't it because he is famous and has a good reputation? In fact, in addition to leading everyone to fight with Maximilian I, what good things did Frederick III do for the benefit of the country and the people? No. Of course, this is now. In history, Frederick III has two major achievements. The first is to secretly support Martin Luther in the religious reform, which deeply changed history. The second is that in 1519, he took the initiative to give up the election for the throne and support Charles V. Because Charles V had enough strength to fight against the Ottoman Turkey, which was in its heyday. Therefore, he was awarded the title of Wise Frederick. But that was in 1519. Even supporting Martin Luther's religious reform was something that happened later. Moreover, supporting religious reform was also due to the need for interests, not because Frederick III was so great. Because Protestantism supported the princes to confiscate the property of the Catholic Church, which was quite beneficial to the princes and nobles. So, for now, Frederick III has not yet achieved any real achievements. His only achievement now is probably to lead the princes to confront the emperor. But, this kind of thing can be done but not said. Because, according to the rules, it is immoral to defeat the superiors. And Frederick III's reputation was also spread by the princes and nobles who supported him in the process of confronting Maximilian I. The common people in this period had little culture, and public opinion was naturally in the hands of the nobles. The princes and nobles said that Frederick III was good, and everyone followed suit. But the common people don't know what's good about it. Inspired by the memory of his previous life, Marin decided to spread the Saxon threat theory, publicize and exaggerate the strength and influence of the electorate of Saxony, and warn all of Germany that Saxony is the most likely behind the unification of Germany. In this way, by exaggerating the threat of Saxony, the relationship between the princes and Saxony can be alienated, so that they are no longer of one mind. At the same time, this also dispersed Marin's pressure. Moreover, while exaggerating the strength of Saxony, Marin also intends to belittle his own strength through propaganda to reassure all countries. For example, Marin would promote the 40,000 troops like this. Among the 40,000 people, 10,000 of them were temporarily borrowed by Marin from the mysterious president of the Morgan Chamber of Commerce. And this non-existent Morgan would be described by Marin as a mysterious mercenary leader. He had 10,000 English mercenaries under his command. In addition, Marin also intended to promote the decisive battle outside Lübeck in this way. When 10,000 local troops and 10,000 mercenaries from the Morgan Chamber of Commerce rushed to the battlefield from the side and rear, the golden carriage that Frederick III and Joachim I rode was just in the rear. Due to the lack of sufficient protection, the 20,000 reinforcements successfully captured the golden carriage, but Frederick III still ran away. In this way, Marin's victory, weakened by propaganda, seemed even more coincidental. As for Marin's previous use of 10,000 civilians from Hamburg to deceive and attract the attention of the Bosse coalition, Marin never mentioned it. He just wanted to make everyone understand that winning that decisive battle was completely accidental. God didn't want the Bosse coalition to win. Moreover, in the Saxon threat theory, Marin pointed out that if the Bosse coalition won the war, Lübeck and Hamburg, the two richest cities in Germany, would be ruthlessly looted by the coalition. And these two cities have property worth about 10 to 20 million gold coins. Once the Saxon army gets these properties, its strength will soar. It can even be said that it has the capital to unify Germany. Because the Saxon army itself is very strong, and the Saxon elector Frederick III has a strong appeal among the princes, even more than the emperor. Once the Saxon elector, who has strong military strength and reputation more than the emperor, obtains property worth tens of millions of gold coins, it is estimated that no one in Germany can stop Saxony from unifying Germany. Therefore, Marin happened to defeat the Bosse coalition and Frederick III, which actually saved Germany. Otherwise, Saxony, which had conquered Lübeck and Hamburg, would have pushed forward and unified Germany with its powerful strength. Let me ask, if it had not failed, who could stop Frederick III, who had the command of 50,000 powerful soldiers? That was 50,000 soldiers. No one in Germany could come up with it, but Frederick III did it. If it had not been for Marin, the time traveler who had turned on the cheat, these 50,000 troops could definitely walk sideways in the German region. Of course, when promoting it, Marin must have downplayed the final victory or defeat, and then emphasized the foundation and strength of the electorate of Saxony, making people aware of the power and danger of Saxony. In addition, in the propaganda, the greatness of Frederick III would also be exposed. Frederick III has mainly done one thing in recent years, that is, to lead people to fight against the emperor. Then, he became great. As long as this fig leaf is torn off, Frederick III will fall from the altar and his influence will be greatly reduced. Chapter 5:15 Specific means. It is true that Frederick III, the Elector of Saxony, did have a high IQ. In Germany at this time, Frederick III's IQ and ability were the best among the German princes, especially the secular princes. Therefore, there are so many princes who obey him. However, facts are one thing, and whether people are willing to admit it is another. It is okay for those secular princes who are not very smart to admit that Frederick III is highly respected, but it is absolutely impossible for them to admit that they are stupid and Frederick III is smarter than them. Anyone who dares to say so will probably draw a knife. What Marin wants to promote is to do the opposite and praise Frederick III's intelligence and ambition. Then, praise Frederick III for fooling other princes, and other princes were sold by Frederick III and helped count the money. Such praise, in private, may be a compliment to Frederick III. However, what is said publicly is basically to slap the faces of other princes to death. You, Frederick III, are so smart that you can fool us? Then aren't we all idiots? Of course, when Marin sent people to publicize, he would never point out that Frederick III fooled those princes. Otherwise, whoever dares to publicize it will be finished. However, it is enough to publicize the cleverness of Frederick III and then casually add a sentence, playing with other princes. Who will be played with by others? Of course, it is the idiots with insufficient IQ. At first, those idiot nobles may not react immediately. But as long as they think about it, they will understand that they have become the background board and the idiots who have been fooled, and anyone will be angry. Even if someone reacts, this is a rumor. However, there will definitely be grudges in their hearts. In the future, when Frederick III wants to encourage them to do something, in order not to become that idiot, they must carefully consider Frederick III's proposal, so as not to become an idiot. Marin didn't really want to use this method to make Frederick III alienated from his friends and relatives. Because that would be too fake. Those secular princes are indeed not very smart, but they have read books after all, and they are not really stupid. As long as Marin publicizes it, even if he can't alienate their relationship with Frederick III for the time being. However, in the future, when they encounter any opinions raised by Frederick III at the conference, they will no longer support it unconditionally, but think about whether they will be fooled. Then, it will be difficult for Frederick III to encourage most of the nobles at once like this time. And this is what Marin wants to achieve. After all, through this war, Marin and the electorate of Saxony have formed a deadly feud. If there is a chance in the future, both sides will not mind adding insult to injury to the other side. Marin was not afraid of the strength of the electorate of Saxony, but he was afraid that Frederick III would fool all of Germany to gang up on him. As long as the reputation of the other party was damaged and other princes were wary of Frederick III, then Marin's goal would be achieved. Even if Frederick III could fool a few allies in the future, he would not be able to harm Marin. As for how to promote, this is too easy. It is definitely not possible to carry out propaganda in the upper class. There are no celebrity endorsements in this era, and there are no newspapers and electronic media as propaganda media. Therefore, Marin can only rely on a place where the most news was transmitted in ancient Europe, the tavern. Ancient Europeans like to drink, and ancient Chinese like to drink tea. Of course, when drinking tea, you can't just sit there alone and drink it, right? You have to brag a little. While bragging to each other, it can also be regarded as exchanging various information. Regardless of whether the other party is bragging or not, as long as the other party speaks brilliantly and brags attractively, that's enough. After listening to the wonderful nyobi jokes, the listener can't help but tell others. Then these wonderful stories spread. And who is the best braggart in the tavern? The bard. Before, Marin had his men cooperate with the bard, boasted about himself, and fabricated the image of Marin, the god's favor. This time, he spent money to hire a group of bards to help him brag about the Elector of Saxony. There must be some bards willing to accept the order. Because Marin paid. Specifically, Marin sent his men to bribe the bards to let them advocate for the Elector of Saxony Frederick III and boast about Frederick III's unparalleled wisdom. Then, Marin became the background board. Although he won the war, Frederick III deceived the princes through superb trickery and helped him put pressure on Marin, and finally achieved a diplomatic result of victory despite defeat. As for those princes who were fooled by Frederick III, they were naturally idiots fooled by Frederick III. Of course, the last point must be concealed and not said too bluntly. After all, this joke that was widely spread by the bard is to be widely spread in various vassal states. You clearly said that the princes were idiots, and you still promoted it on their territory. Isn't it giving your head to others to chop off? Therefore, the last point must be said in an obscure and vague way. But those princes are not all fools, and even if they are stupid, there will always be a few smart people and advisors under them. As long as they react and know that they have been promoted as idiots, they will definitely be angry. However, they can't touch the bards directly. If they move, won't they just admit that they are fools? Therefore, their best way is to pretend not to know. Later, they will find an opportunity to deal with the bards who spread the news. As for whether the bards will accept the order, don't worry about it. What is a bard? In fact, it is a poor person who travels around the world to perform and makes a living. They are exactly the same as the storytellers and singers in ancient China, all of whom are low-income people. Marin is willing to buy them, which is equivalent to giving them money to spend. Who wouldn't be happy? Besides, when Marin sent intelligence personnel to buy those bards, he would tell them in advance that this story came from Saxony-Wittenberg, and it is said to be from the Saxon palace. In this way, they are not original, and the hostility from the princes will be much less. After all, it is not the mastermind. Moreover, the statement from the Saxon palace can also enhance the persuasiveness of this joke. Moreover, like those who perform in the rivers and lakes, bards also wander around and rarely stay in one place for too long. Even if the local nobles wanted to retaliate afterwards, they might not be able to find anyone. In this way, after looting Wittenberg, the capital of the Electorate of Saxony, Marin dug another big hole and pitted Frederick III. Although he knew that he would suffer a loss in this meeting in Worms, Marin had to give face. Why? Because if Marin did not go, or ignored the decision of the imperial parliament, then Frederick III would have more reason to form an alliance to beat him up. Moreover, even if Marin directly forced the Danes to hand over the throne, as long as no one recognized it, then Marin would still be recognized by the mainstream of Europe like Maximilian I, who bought the throne of the Eastern Roman Empire. This lesson was learned by Marin from Maximilian I. At the beginning, the sale of the throne was still led by Marin. Unfortunately, due to the loss of territory and political considerations, although the exiled last Byzantine emperor announced that he would sell the throne to Maximilian I, it was difficult to gain widespread recognition in Europe, and Maximilian I was unable to become a true emperor. Now, most European countries still call Maximilian I the King of Germany. Therefore, although he wanted to annex Denmark privately, But thinking of the need for diplomatic recognition, Marin had to bring King Hans of Denmark to Worms for negotiations. Although he might suffer a loss, he would not gain nothing. At least, Marin, who holds King Hans of Denmark and almost all the dignitaries in Denmark, has great bargaining power. Even if he suffers a loss, it is worth it if he can get the general recognition of the imperial parliament. With the wide recognition of the Holy Roman Empire Parliament, it will generally be recognized by most European countries. Only aristocratic status that is widely recognized is a true aristocratic status. Otherwise, if no one recognizes it, then you will become a black household in the aristocratic circle, and you can only be happy by yourself. Chapter 5:16, The Decision of Grand Duke Alexander. Of course, Marin did not completely passively accept the pressure from the other side. Most of the princes who went to Worms to attend the imperial conference this time were actually the princes of the anti-emperor faction. These people naturally had no good feelings towards Marin, who had a deep relationship with the emperor. If negotiations were held under the witness of these people, it would definitely be a one-sided pressure. Therefore, Marin planned to pull some princes who were close to him to go together to strengthen his momentum. For example, the small princes of the imperial city, Duke John II of Clever, and the nobles of the emperor's faction and the nobles of the various departments of the Swabian alliance. However, this time, because Marin publicly cut off his relationship with the emperor, it might cause dissatisfaction among the nobles of the emperor's faction. Moreover, the emperor could not tell them publicly that Marin sold Switzerland to him. Therefore, the nobles of the emperor's faction were most likely to have differences, some would support him, and some would oppose him. But the emperor himself must be clear about the inside story, so he would definitely support him. After all, if the emperor did not support him, Marin might not sell the 18,000 Swiss prisoners of war to the emperor. If these 18,000 people were taken away by the French and other anti-emperor forces to deal with the troops for land exchange, the harm would be too great. Although the dozens of imperial cities are small, they have little land but a lot of wealth because of the existence of the Hanseatic League. Therefore, they also have a certain say. Among these 60 or 70 imperial cities, except for a few cities in Saxony, most of them must be on the side of Lübeck and Hamburg, that is, on the side of Marin. After all, if Marin is unlucky, Lübeck and Hamburg will also be finished. Moreover, Archbishop Mainz did not invite the dozens of imperial cities or the princes of the emperor's faction to this temporary imperial meeting. So, strictly speaking, it is an informal meeting. It will be a formal meeting only when all forces are present. Marin's countermeasure is this: you want to negotiate under the witness of the princes, right? Okay, I'll call everyone here, and they can't all be your people. In addition, Marin also wrote to the Pope's father-in-law, asking him to send an important envoy to witness the negotiation together. In this way, when putting pressure on Marin, those religious princes dared not be presumptuous. After all, they had to give face to the Pope. As for those secular princes, not all of them stood on the side of Frederick III. Marin pulled the representatives of the emperor and the imperial city, as well as the Duke of Clever and several neutral princes, to compete with them. Besides, Marin would not be afraid of those secular princes alone. These stupid secular princes seem to have huge military strength, but it is hard to say about their combat effectiveness, and they may not be their opponents. With the princes of their own faction helping to speak, and the church sending people to watch and suppress those religious princes, the opponent's strength will be at least weakened by half. At that time, the negotiations will not be too disadvantageous. For this reason, Marin sent a messenger to ask the emperor for help, asking the emperor to lead a group of princes to Worms to support him. At the same time, Marin also wrote to Lübeck and Hamburg, asking them to use their abilities and call on those imperial cities to come to Worms to help quarrel. After all, Lübeck and Hamburg are now in the same boat. Moreover, Lübeck and Hamburg are actually representatives of the negotiating parties. It's just that the people in the imperial parliament ignored these two cities. Because, in this war, our army is actually basically under the command of Marin. Therefore, those princes all speak for Marin. If the Hanseatic League's group of local tyrants are brought along, there is another unexpected benefit, that is, it can influence those poor nobles who owe the Hanseatic League and take the opportunity to ask them to change their positions. Apart from anything else, it is still very feasible to reduce some debts and tempt those poor nobles to change their positions. Just as the German region was in panic due to this large-scale war, in Vilnius, the capital of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, Grand Duke Alexander of Lithuania was also having an important conversation with his younger brother Prince Sigismund. Grand Duke Alexander looked at his younger brother, Prince Sigismund, and asked seriously. "Sigismund, have you really decided to marry the Hoffman family?" Prince Sigismund nodded and said. "Yes, brother, I have decided. But, I heard that although Marin defeated the Saxons and Brandenburgers on the battlefield, he is very passive in diplomacy. I heard that Frederick III is planning to call on most of the German princes to jointly attack Marin. Isn't it too risky for you to decide to marry the Hoffman family at this time?" Grand Duke Alexander said worriedly. "You know, Grand Duke Alexander himself is in poor health, and his wife is from an enemy country and has long run back to her parents' home. Therefore, Grand Duke Alexander knows that it is difficult for him to have offspring. Therefore, the Grand Duke of Lithuania and the throne of Poland are very likely to be passed on to this younger brother. In this way, the wife that the younger brother marries is likely to be the future Queen of Poland and Grand Duchess of Lithuania. But if Marin Hoffman was ganged up by most of the German princes and lost his territory and title, the Hoffman family would become a civilian family. Even if he retained his knighthood before his rise, and of the Hoffman family would not be worthy of his younger brother. But the problem is that divorce is not easy in Europe these days. If the king wants a divorce, he must get the approval of the Pope himself. His brother, King Vladislas II of Bohemia, met Pope Alexander VI of the Borgia family when he was divorcing. As long as he paid money, he would grant a divorce. The current Pope Julius II seems to be much more upright than Alexander VI. At that time, even if the younger brother wants to divorce the Pope may not be willing to grant the divorce. If the divorce fails, it will be a waste of money. As for what the younger brother said about of the Hoffman family being very beautiful. So what? In ancient Europe, wives were never chosen based on appearance, but marriages of equal status were emphasized. Bloodline is the most important, beauty is not so important. Prince Sigismund certainly understood the concerns of Grand Duke Alexander. However, he answered confidently. "Brother, please don't worry. Although Marin seems to be in a dangerous situation, in fact, those German religious princes are unlikely to agree to join forces. And the German religious princes account for almost half of the princes. As long as they don't send troops, the coalition that Frederick III wants to form will be half destroyed. How do you know that those religious princes will not participate in the troops?" Grand Duke Alexander asked in confusion. "I learned about it when I visited East Frisia. Do you know? When His Majesty the Pope returned to Rome, he was accompanied by 7,000 elite soldiers sent by Marin. If this army had not captured Rome, His Majesty the Pope might not even be able to enter Rome. Is there such a thing?" Grand Duke Alexander asked curiously. "Yes, the current Pope and the former Pope are mortal enemies. After the death of the former Pope, the current Pope wanted to return to Rome, but was naturally rejected. So, the current Pope simply led 7,000 elite soldiers to attack the city of Rome, forcing those cardinals to side with him. Some of this information was revealed to him by Marin. And some of it was guessed by himself." "You mean, the current Pope came to power through a military coup?" Grand Duke Alexander said in horror. "That's probably the case, but the current Pope is a powerful archbishop in the Holy See, with a long history, and is indeed qualified to become the Pope. That means, the current Pope will support Marin. That's about it." Prince Sigismund nodded. "But even if half of the princes don't participate, the remaining half can gather an army of 100,000, right? Can Marin stop them? The religious princes won't participate, and those secular princes don't all support Frederick III. Many princes are actually watching the situation. Moreover, even if they gather 100,000 troops, they may not be able to defeat Marin. Can't even defeat 100,000 people. Is Marin that powerful?" Grand Duke Alexander was a little unconvinced. "Brother, think about it, the coalition forces of Brandenburg and Saxony before, that was 50,000 elite soldiers. In addition to 30,000 main veterans of Brandenburg and Saxony, the remaining 20,000 were the world-famous Swiss mercenaries, but they were still defeated? Do you think that the coalition forces formed by those secular German princes can defeat Marin's 40,000 elite troops? You know, it is said to be a 100,000 coalition, but there are only a few elites who are really combat capable, with a total of at most 20,000 to 30,000 people. The rest are basically here to mix. Such an army can defeat Marin's 40,000 powerful elites. A step back, if Marin's 40,000 people hide in a city for defense, it will be difficult for 100,000 people to capture the city. In short, it is difficult for Marin to fail. Difficult to fail? What if they are under siege for a long time? The food consumption of 40,000 people is an astronomical figure. Grand Duke Alexander was a little unconvinced. However, Prince Sigismund knew that Marin had advanced fertilizer technology. Therefore, every city in East Frisia was full of food, which could not be eaten up. So, he laughed and said, "I have been to East Frisia. The cities of Auric and Emden there are full of food. There is even a small city built next to Auric to store food." Grand Duke Alexander opened his mouth in surprise and said, "Doesn't he need to sell food for money?" Prince Sigismund thought about it and still didn't plan to tell his brother the secret of fertilizer. Instead, he said, "Brother, have you forgotten? Marin is a big salt merchant. He makes a huge profit from selling salt. He doesn't need to sell food to make money." Grand Duke Alexander nodded and expressed his understanding. After all, they brothers and Marin have a big trade order of hundreds of thousands of gold coins of salt every year. Marin is indeed not short of money. So, Marin will not fail? Yes, at least not. With so much food and such a powerful army, he will not be defeated even if he defends the city. In fact, if those princes gather an army of 100,000 to besiege the city, the food of the coalition forces may run out first if the war continues. Prince Sigismund said firmly. After thinking for a while, Grand Duke Alexander stood up and said, "That's good. Let's do this. I will send the Minister of Foreign Affairs to Germany in my name with great fanfare, find Marin directly, publicly support him, and propose marriage to and for you. Don't wait and see. No, since according to what you said, Marin will never fail. Then, let's take advantage of this opportunity to show our goodwill. It's better to send charcoal in the snow than to add icing on the cake. There is no such idiom in Europe, but it means this. We are now publicly supporting him, which is equivalent to helping him a lot, and he will owe us a big favor. After all, Poland and Lithuania are both powerful countries in Europe, and our support is also more deterrent. And if we wait until the results come out before supporting, it will be icing on the cake, which is dispensable. Brother is wise." Prince Sigismund flattered him a little. The next day, according to the instructions of Grand Duke Alexander, Lithuanian Foreign Minister Beresky set out to Germany with great fanfare under the escort of 3,000 plate-armored knights and more knight attendants. In fact, it does not take 3,000 plate-armored knights to escort a foreign minister. With such a scale, they can conquer a vassal state. But the intention of Grand Duke Alexander was to show the powerful military force of Lithuania and Poland, so he did not hesitate to send so many knights just to show off his muscles in front of those German princes. Anyway, Lithuania and Poland are both major knight countries, and they are not short of these 3,000 or 2,000 knights. And this is also a very strong means of support for Marin. Besides, he was just showing off his muscles, and he did not say that he would declare war on the German princes. Grand Duke Alexander is just timid, but as the monarch of two major countries, he is not without wisdom. This public show of muscle shows his certain political wisdom. Anyway, I just sent someone to propose a marriage, and I didn't declare war. Even if Marin is really finished by then, the worst thing is to regret the engagement. After all, they haven't gotten married yet, they just came to make an appointment. But to outsiders, this is very different. Damn, Marin actually has such a powerful ally, who can easily send a few thousand knights to march. In addition, Poland and Lithuania are indeed powerful European countries, and the deterrent effect is indeed not small, which is of great help to Marin. The most important thing is that Poland and Lithuania have not stated that they will participate in the war. At worst, if the situation does not go well, they can just go back. Anyway, they can advance and retreat freely. What? You said the dignity of the king? Grand Duke Alexander had already lost that thing by being beaten to death by the Russians of the Grand Duchy of Moscow. Along with it, the courage of Grand Duke Alexander was also gone. Therefore, although Grand Duke Alexander showed off his muscles this time, it was purely for showing off his muscles. It seems a bit difficult to get him to really send troops. However, such support is enough. After all, those German princes did not know that Grand Duke Alexander was actually unwilling to fight. Chapter 5:17 Rushing to Worms. Regardless of the decision made by Lithuania, Marin was very happy in demolishing Wittenberg. Standing on the top of the city wall of Wittenberg, Marin was filled with emotion. I finally experienced the feeling of being a city manager. No wonder the city managers like to smash, loot and rob so much. It turns out to be very cool. But, it's too unclassy to smash, loot and rob those old men and women. And if you smash, loot and rob strong men, you may get stabbed. Alas, it's not easy. A few days later, the soldiers returning from Schleswig brought 2 heavyweight prisoners of war, who were also negotiation targets, King Hans of Denmark and Joachim I, Elector of Brandenburg. The King of Denmark laughed when he saw Marin. Marin, even if you defeat me, so what? You will not get any good at the imperial conference. There are many more people who support Frederick than those who support you. This time, I think I won't pay too much. In fact, your victory may be in vain. Ha! Marin looked at Hans coldly and said. I forgot to tell you, Your Majesty Hans, I plan to take 10,000 elite troops to Worms. The army is besieging the city, do you think they dare to do so excessively? What? You want to take 10,000 troops to Worms? Do you want to make a military remonstration? Are you crazy? This is tantamount to rebellion. King Hans was surprised. If Marin really took 10,000 troops to Worms, under the deterrence of the military might, those princes would inevitably be cautious. Marin looked at King Hans proudly and said. It's because of you, Your Majesty Hans, that I brought 10,000 troops to protect the safety of you, the King of Denmark, and the Elector of Brandenburg. After all, your lives are very valuable. Of course. Marin would not publicly remonstrate with the army, as that would lead to revenge afterwards. However, with the reputation of protecting the safety of the King of Denmark and the Elector of Brandenburg, it is a bit too grand to bring 10,000 guards to Worms, but you can't say anything about it. Moreover, Marin was very smart. He brought 10,000 cavalrymen with him, but only let 10,000 of them wear formal armor. The other 5,000 people, although they were all elite soldiers, wore casual clothes. They were nominally cavalry attendants, but they were actually elite. Among them, among the 10,000 cavalrymen, only 2,000 black-shirt knights, former lancers and hundreds of guards were formal cavalry. The other 6,000 people were all mounted infantry. However, because horse farming was popular in Europe, many people had served horses and could ride horses. These more than 6,000 selected infantrymen were actually good at riding. This time when going to Worms, Marin implemented a configuration of one person with 2 horses. As for horses, except for the war horses of the 3,000 regular cavalry in Marin's guards, the rest of the horses were captured from the cavalry of Brandenburg and Saxony. As for the source of food for the 10,000 troops and 20,000 horses after they arrived in Worms, Marin had already arranged it. He arranged for people to return to East Frisia and ordered Emden to organize a fleet to transport food into the Rhine. Because Worms is on the Rhine. The distance that the Rhine is suitable for inland shipping is very long, and Worms is just within the range suitable for shipping. Therefore, although the demand for food and grass for 10,000 troops and 20,000 horses is large, it is enough to have a fleet to provide it. Joachim I, who came with King Hans, did not speak. The confidence of the young elector was completely destroyed in this war. Coupled with the humiliating experience of being captured, Joachim I was in a bad mood recently. Whenever he had the chance, he would drink desperately to relieve his sorrow. When he met Marin, Joachim I's hangover had not completely disappeared, and he was a little confused. Moreover, there was nothing to say when a loser faced a winner. Only the Danish King Hans provoked Marin with a bad mouth. Joachim I knew very well that he was still a prisoner of war, so why provoke the other party? And he was also unlucky to have such an unreliable father-in-law who dragged himself into the quagmire. Before leaving, Lerick, the special envoy of the Imperial Parliament, came over and asked Marin to release the captured John and John's youngest son John Frederick. Marin was going to Worms for negotiations and was in a bad mood, so he whipped Baron Lerick hard with a horsewhip, leaving a bloody mark on Baron Lerick's face. Baron Lerick screamed immediately, and then shouted. You dare to hit the envoy of the Imperial Parliament, do you want to be an enemy of the entire empire? Marin said to Lerick coldly. You can also ask John and his son to be released. Do you think you are the emperor? You are just an envoy. Moreover, the Imperial Parliament did not issue such a stupid order. Because everyone knows that this is impossible. Only a fool like you would make such a brainless request. If you don't want to be whipped again, get out of here. Leric, who was timid, had to leave in disgrace, and Marin ignored him. Leric is from the Duchy of Lüneburg, and Henry, Duke of Lüneburg, is the brother-in-law of Frederick III, so he naturally favors the electorate of Saxony. Therefore, Marin did not intend to give Leric a good face. Moreover, anyone with a normal brain would not make such a request just now. The imperial parliament asked Marin to take Danish King Hans and Brandenburg Elector Joachim I to Worms because they were important parties and important members of the negotiations. Because this negotiation may involve the issue of territorial cession. For such a major issue, the ministers under him were not qualified to decide. Only these two people who personally participated in the negotiations were qualified to decide. It just so happened that it could be signed and take effect. Even so, Marin did not dare to take it lightly. For his own safety and fear that the princes would take the opportunity to kidnap King Hans and Joachim I, he simply took 10,000 elite soldiers to accompany him to Worms. First, to ensure his own safety and the safety of the hostages. Second, it also meant to deter the princes. But this brain-dead Baron Leric thought that the big sign of the imperial parliament was particularly useful, and he actually wanted Marin to release John, the heir to the electorate of Saxony, and his youngest son. It was simply stupid to the extreme. So he was whipped. Afterwards, even if he appealed, those imperial parliamentarians would not help him. Before leaving, Marin handed over the remaining 30,000 troops to Schwarz, asking him to stay with the troops in Wittenberg, the capital of the electorate of Saxony. The reason why Schwarz was left to continue to garrison Wittenberg was that there were still many heavyweight prisoners of war in Wittenberg that could not be taken away. Apart from anything else, John and John's son John Frederick, the two important hostages of the Wettin family, were a bit troublesome. John was okay and could be taken away directly. But little John Frederick was only 2 years old and could not withstand the tossing of a long journey. If he died, Marin would have to bear a huge blame. In addition, the great nobles of the electorate of Saxony, together with their respective families, were also placed under house arrest by Marin's army. They also had old, weak, women and children, who were not suitable for long-distance travel. After all, they were all great nobles, and one of them would be infamous if he died. Therefore, Marin simply let Schwarz stay in Wittenberg with 30,000 troops to continue to supervise these people. At the same time, he used them as bargaining chips. Before leaving, Marin said to Schwarz in front of King Hans and Elector Joachim I in a gloomy tone, "I may be in danger when I go to Worms this time. If I encounter an accident, Schwarz, remember, immediately set fire to Wittenberg, and leave no nobles in Wittenberg, including John and John Frederick the Younger. Then, withdraw to Aurich. Aurich has enough food. Even if the coalition forces of the princes attack, we can hold out for several years and wear the enemy out." Schwarz immediately accepted Marin's order solemnly, saying that he would carry out Marin's order to the letter. But Marin changed the subject and said to Schwarz, "Send someone to inform your father-in-law Mikkel that the same thing will happen in Schleswig. If anything happens to me, all the great nobles in the royal palace of Schleswig, including members of the Danish royal family, will be burned to death, leaving no one alive. To the outside world, just say it's an accident." The Danish king on the side was terrified after hearing this, but in fact, Marin said this deliberately for Hans to hear. Marin was afraid that Hans would make trouble at the imperial conference, and if a king threw a tantrum at the conference, Marin could not do anything. After the negotiations began, Marin could not send his men to detain King Hans, and he had to let him sit in front of the stage. Once at the negotiating table, King Hans would have more room to play. Therefore, he could only use Hans' family members imprisoned in the royal palace of Schleswig as a threat. King Hans' eldest son Christian and youngest son Prince Francis were both there. If Marin's men killed Hans's family, even if Hans achieved success in the negotiations, there would be no one to inherit. After preparing all this, Marin led 10,000 elite soldiers and 2 important prisoners of war to Worms. Chapter 5:18, The Rush to Berlin. On the surface, Marin asked Schwarz to stay in Wittenberg with 30,000 troops in front of King Hans and Joachim I. However, there was no resistance in the electorate of Saxony at this time. Even if there was, 10,000 troops would be enough to deal with it. So, in fact, before Marin left, he only asked Schwarz to stay in Wittenberg with 20,000 troops. And secretly, he sent Wolf Esperand to lead 10,000 troops to attack Berlin, the capital of the Electorate of Brandenburg. As for why Berlin was attacked. Because Berlin is the capital of the Electorate of Brandenburg. As long as Berlin is occupied, it will naturally take the initiative in negotiations. Berlin is not as rich as Wittenberg. Although it is the capital of the electorate, it is an ordinary city, which is only larger and more prosperous than some county towns. Even in the later Prussian kingdom period, the Brandenburg region was still a traditional agricultural area with an underdeveloped economy. The Kingdom of Prussia really took off because it got the Westphalia region after the war, including the coal-rich Ruhr area. At that time, it was the era of the great development of steam engines. With coal, the Westphalia region with the Ruhr area as the core naturally developed. Then, the expanded Kingdom of Prussia became the German Empire through war. In other words, until the acquisition of the economically developed Westphalia region, Brandenburg had always been an agricultural country with an underdeveloped economy. Even if Berlin was captured, Marin would not have made much money. However, controlling all members of the Brandenburg branch of the Hohenzollern family is of great significance. Joachim I's son Joachim II was just born in January this year and is only a few months old. Joachim I's only brother Albert, who later became the Archbishop of Magdeburg and the Archbishop of Mainz, is only 15 years old and has not yet reached adulthood. Moreover, among Joachim I's uncles, only Frederick, who became the Count of Ansbach, is still alive. Unfortunately, Ansbach is far away in Bavaria and belongs to the southern part of Germany. Therefore, after Joachim I was captured, Berlin is now leaderless, and there is no big man who can convince the public to come out to turn the tide. On the contrary, the electorate of Saxony has John, who co-rules Saxony with his brother Frederick III. Even if Frederick III is not there, Saxony is not in chaos, and it has resisted Marin's army for a long time. But Berlin is now in chaos. The most important thing is that there is no regular army stationed in Berlin. And this is the main reason why Marin intends to send troops to attack Berlin. When Joachim I led the army to the expedition, he took away almost all the regular troops of the electorate of Brandenburg. As for Berlin, 3,000 conscripts were arranged for temporary guarding. Because Joachim I felt that his side would win, and the army would not be away for a long time, and he would be able to return home victorious. Therefore, no regular army was left to guard the capital Berlin. Moreover, the electorate of Brandenburg is poor. There are no more regular troops if you want them. The main reason is that there is no money to support so many regular troops. The electorate of Brandenburg could only muster 15,000 regular troops before. In addition, the distance from Wittenberg to Berlin is only more than 100 kilometers. It is certainly difficult for infantry to travel this distance. However, Marin seized a lot of horses in the electorate of Saxony. Although most of them are draft horses, they are still no problem to use them for traveling. After all, the electorate of Saxony is a country with developed commerce and many horses. Even if only Wittenberg and the surrounding rural areas were captured, Marin still seized tens of thousands of draft horses. This number shocked Marin, but he quickly understood it. After all, Wittenberg is the capital of the economically developed electorate of Saxony, and nobles and rich people are also concentrated there. Is there a problem with nobles and rich people raising a few more horses at home? Just like in later generations, there are a row of luxury cars parked in the garages of those rich people. Is there any problem? No. Now, even if Marin took 20,000 horses to Worms, he still left more than 10,000 horses. Although most of them were draft horses, they were enough. According to the discussion between Marin and Wolf Esperand, 10,000 veterans were mobilized and rode 10,000 draft horses. Without sparing the horsepower, it is no problem to reach Berlin within one day. It's just over 100 kilometers. It takes a day and a night to travel. The horses will not be too tired, and there will be no dead horses. At most, the horses need to rest for a few days and feed some good food. After the 15,000 regular troops that Joachim brought to Lübeck were annihilated, there are no regular troops in the electorate of Brandenburg. Even if someone saw the 10,000 troops led by Wolf Esperand, they were powerless to stop them. And those conscripts in the countryside dared not stop them. Because those militias met the 10,000 veterans led by Wolf Esperand, and they were definitely sending their heads. It was easy to reach Berlin without anyone stopping them. As for the siege, that's not difficult. Because Marin also assigned Nicholas Cage and his special forces to Wolf-Esperand. With the help of Cage's Flying Claw special forces, plus it was a sneak attack, it would definitely not be a problem to take Berlin. After taking Berlin, Marin's negotiations in Worms would be even more advantageous. Another point that needs to be explained is that after Marin received the negotiation notice from the Worms imperial parliament, he not only deliberately let the Saxons in Wittenberg know, but also leaked the news to the Brandenburgers. Some Brandenburg merchants who came to Saxony to do business probably brought the news of the negotiations back home. After all, the electorate of Brandenburg and the electorate of Saxony border each other, and the two sides have frequent exchanges, and merchants also exchange what they have. Therefore, this news must have been passed back to Berlin. At this time, the Brandenburgers who heard that the negotiations were about to begin must have relaxed, and they would not have thought that Marin would send a large army to attack Berlin. Sending troops to attack Berlin at this time is absolutely unexpected. Moreover, with the 3,000 conscripts in Berlin, even if they confronted head-on, they could not stop the attack of 10,000 East Frisian veterans. In addition, Wolf-Esperand was also good at using strategies and sneak attacks, so it was difficult for this military operation to attack Berlin to go wrong. On the second day after Marin led 10,000 troops to Worms, Wolf-Esperand also led 10,000 veteran infantry soldiers with rich combat experience, rode 10,000 draft horses looted from the electorate of Saxony, and marched non-stop towards Berlin, intending to take Berlin in one fell swoop and increase the bargaining chips in Worms. Accompanying Wolf-Esperand were Nicholas Cage, who had a close relationship with him, and more than 200 special forces led by Cage who were good at using flying claws to climb the city walls. Chapter 519, Completely Different Attitudes. The raid on Berlin went unimaginably smoothly. Wolf-Esperand and his 10,000 troops arrived outside Berlin at midnight on the second day after their departure. After resting for 2 or 3 hours 10 kilometers away from Berlin, the army approached the Berlin Wall at around 3 in the morning. Special Forces Commander Nicholas Cage once again personally took on the battlefield, bringing more than 200 men, using flying claws, climbed up the wall in the blind spot of Berlin's defense, and quickly entered the city and rushed straight to the south gate of Berlin. At this time, Berlin, because of the news that the two sides would negotiate in Worms, did not prepare for Marin to send troops to attack at this time. Moreover, there were only 3,000 conscripts in the city, and even the commander was a young nobleman with a half-baked level. Therefore, the defense of Berlin was full of loopholes. Moreover, behind the gate of Berlin, there were not enough soldiers to guard the gate hole, and there was no debris to block the gate hole. Under such a flawed defense, the gatekeepers of Berlin naturally found it difficult to resist the raid of Cage's special forces. Soon, the south gate of Berlin was opened, and Wolf-Esperand led a large army to swarm in. Facing the enemy's night attack, even professional regular troops are prone to chaos, let alone the 3,000 conscripts. Before Wolf-Esperand ordered the assault, the defenders in the city collapsed on their own and ran all over the streets. Some conscripts were even scared and rushed around like headless flies. In the end, only the 200 loyal guards stationed in the Berlin palace were still holding on, insisting on protecting the elector's wife and Prince Joachim, who was only a few months old. However, Marin sent Wolf-Esperand to attack Berlin, and he didn't intend to do anything to Berlin. The reason is that Joachim I didn't do anything to anger Marin. Frederick III jumped up and down, and wanted to kill Marin. Naturally, Marin would not be polite and directly demolished Wittenberg. As Brandenburg did not anger Marin, Marin did not plan to do anything, but just took Berlin as a bargaining chip. Therefore, Wolf-Esperand did not attack the royal palace in Berlin, but first sent troops to control the important roads in the city, and controlled the mansions of those great nobles, restricting their entry and exit. Then, at dawn, through negotiations, Wolf-Esperand led his troops into the royal palace in Berlin. The person in charge of negotiating with Wolf-Esperand was Prince Albert, who was only 15 years old, the younger brother of Joachim I. As for the wife of the elector, Princess Elizabeth of Denmark, she was so scared that she could not speak, and she only knew to hide in the bedroom with her son and tremble. Therefore, without the elders to make the decision, Prince Albert, who was only 15 years old, bit the bullet and started negotiations with Wolf-Esperand. What surprised Prince Albert was that Wolf-Esperand, who led the troops to conquer Berlin, was surprisingly easy to talk to. In the end, the two sides agreed that Wolf-Esperand's army could take over the palace, but they were not allowed to enter the residential area where the elector's wife Elizabeth and the young Prince Joachim lived. Wolf Esperon's plan to enter the palace was just to enter the treasury to plunder. After all, although Brandenburg was not rich, a mosquito was still meat. But in order not to stimulate the young and vigorous Joachim I, Marin had told Wolf Esperon in advance that he would only rob cash, not plunder those gold and silver objects, and not enter the inner courtyard to harass the elector's family. As for the noble mansions in Brandenburg, Wolf Esperon adopted the same strategy, only robbed gold and silver coins, and conspicuous gold and silver objects, and did not rob other property. Of course, the food and grass for the 10,000 troops also needed to be extracted from the granary in Berlin. In fact, as royal family and nobles, they rarely exchanged their property into gold coins and put them in the warehouse. In order to maintain the luxurious life of the nobles, they often exchanged gold and silver coins for a large number of luxury goods and gold and silver objects, and decorated the palace and mansion magnificently. Although Wolf Esperon sent people to rob the gold and silver coins in the palace and those nobles' homes, he only plundered a small part of the wealth of those nobles. After all, the nobles of Brandenburg did not have as much business as the Saxon nobles, and their cash was also limited. After statistics, only gold and silver coins worth hundreds of thousands of golden gold coins were seized from the palace and those nobles' homes, which was really shabby compared with the electorate of Saxony. Of course, there was nothing that could be done about it. Because of the low agricultural output, the financial resources of an aristocrat who relied on agricultural output could not be compared with that of a commercial aristocrat. The gap between the two is equivalent to the difference between a well-off family and a wealthy family. In desperation, in order to collect 200,000 gold coins in cash, Wolf Esperon sent people to the homes of the few big merchants in Berlin and extorted tens of thousands of gold coins to collect 200,000 gold coins in cash. Then, Wolf Esperon stopped, did not let his men rob the nobles of other properties, and did not order the whole city to be looted, which surprised the people of Berlin. Wolf Esperon even allowed Prince Albert to write down everything that happened in Berlin in a letter, which was sent by Wolf Esperon's messengers to Marin's army on the way to Worms. Because of the two burdens of Danish King Hans and Brandenburg Elector Joachim I riding in a carriage, Marin's army did not march too fast. Before arriving in Worms, Prince Albert's letter was delivered to Marin by Wolf Esperon's messengers. Along with this letter was a detailed battle report that Wolf Esperon wrote to Marin. Upon hearing that Berlin was attacked, Joachim I stood up angrily and yelled at Marin. "Why did you attack Berlin? Negotiations are about to begin. If anything happens to my family, I will reject all your requests. Even if I become your prisoner forever. Don't worry, Lord Joachim, your family is fine. Moreover, my soldiers did not enter the residential area of your palace, but only took some gold and silver coins from the warehouse." After that, Marin showed Joachim I the detailed battle report sent by Wolf Esperon. After reading the battle report, Joachim I sighed and said, "I don't have much money to begin with. I am the poorest among the 7 electors. Now the only 100,000 gold coins left in cash have been robbed by you, and I will have to pay a large amount of compensation later. From now on, I will live a hard life of eating black bread every meal." Marin thought about it, it really is. The electorate of Brandenburg didn't have much money to begin with, and now it has to cede land and pay compensation. Joachim I will really have to tighten his belt to live in the future. But then again, it was because he had no money that Joachim I was fooled by Frederick III and helped to attack Lübeck and Hamburg. After all, as long as he could capture either Lübeck or Hamburg, Joachim I would be rich. But he didn't expect that he would fail in the end. It seems that he will have to cede land and pay compensation. It's really unlucky. Chapter 520 Private Agreement. Although he felt a little sympathetic towards Joachim I, the unlucky guy, Marin would not let him off easily. After all, if he failed, the other party would not let him off easily. However, there are priorities. For Marin, Joachim I was not his biggest worry, but Frederick III was. Moreover, this negotiation was held in Worms, and Frederick III also brought a large number of princes to help. Marin knew how difficult the negotiations were even with his toes. In addition, after the negotiations began, King Hans and Joachim I, as the defeated party, would definitely hope to pay less. Therefore, it would be a fight between dragons and tigers that was no less than a war. Therefore, Marin hoped to divide the alliance between Frederick III and Joachim I to prevent the other party from eating him up. Coincidentally, after hearing Joachim I's lament, Marin's heart moved. Marin knew that Joachim I really didn't have much money. The reason why Frederick III was dragged into this war was not only because of their good relationship and the marriage relationship with Denmark, but also because he coveted the wealth of Lübeck and Hamburg, which was an important motivation for Joachim I to send troops. In order to win and make huge profits, Joachim I made a desperate move and pulled almost all the regular troops of the electorate of Brandenburg to the front line. Being able to speak frankly about the economic difficulties in front of Marin could conclude that Joachim I was still very eager for money. Of course, as a nobleman, he would not say directly that he liked money. Therefore, lamenting that he would have to eat black bread in the future, like Joachim I, is the correct way of speaking. But the truly arrogant nobles are ashamed to talk about profit. Joachim I can lament the loss of interests in front of enemies like Marin, proving that he is a noble who values interests, not a noble. So, Marin turned his eyes and suddenly had an idea. So, he said to Joachim I, "Lord Joachim, in fact, if you want to reduce the loss, there are ways." At this point, Marin suddenly stopped, and then smiled mysteriously at Joachim I. If Joachim I was a truly noble, he would definitely disdain it. And if Joachim I was a very practical noble, he would definitely not miss this opportunity. Sure enough, Joachim I's eyes lit up, and then asked, "What is the way?" "Cooperate with me." Marin answered leisurely. "Cooperate with you? Could it be that you will share the ransom with me? You know, I am also the target of your blackmail." Joachim I said dissatisfiedly. "Although it is not a good thing to share the ransom with you, but in nature, it is not much different." Marin took a sip of tea and said slowly, "What do you mean?" Joachim I was a little confused. "What I mean is, as long as Lord Joachim cooperates with me in the negotiations in Worms, I can significantly reduce the amount of your ransom." "How much?" Joachim I asked with some interest. "At least hundreds of thousands of gold coins." Marin is not short of money now, but political matters are a lot of trouble. If Joachim I is willing to help him, he doesn't mind giving him some benefits. Hundreds of thousands of gold coins, then, can you cede less land? Joachim I asked in a pushy manner. "Don't think too much, Lord Joachim, if I let you pay less money, others can't see it. Anyway, I have the final say on whether I have received your money or not, and others don't know. If you cede less land, won't all of Germany know it? At that time, it will be difficult for you to be a man in the aristocratic circle." Marin rolled his eyes. "Joachim I thought about it, it's true. Things like money transactions will not be carried out in front of the public. How much compensation the electorate of Brandenburg paid to Marin would definitely not be delivered under everyone's witness. In the end, no one knew how much compensation Brandenburg paid to Marin. But if the electorate of Brandenburg ceded less land to Marin, that would not escape the eyes of others. Because, as long as everyone knew who sent the officials on the relevant land involved in the cession, it would be clear. It was embarrassing enough for Joachim I to be defeated and captured in the war. If it was known that he was hooking up with Marin in private, it would be shameful to be a human being. His former allies would also alienate him. Therefore, Joachim I said to Marin with a serious face, "I have no problem cooperating with you, but how can you ensure that the news will not be leaked?" This is also the biggest concern of Joachim I's cooperation with Marin. Marin thought about it, borrowed a Bible from the military chaplain, and then stroked the Bible in front of Joachim I, swearing to keep the secret. "If it is leaked, I will run naked in the square in front of the Auric Palace." Run naked. Joachim I was shocked by Marin's oath. But think about it, running naked in the square outside the palace in public is indeed very embarrassing. It is better to die. In the end, Joachim I believed in Marin. But he didn't know that Marin didn't believe in Christianity at all. He believed in a god of time travel, who told him to travel through time. Of course, Marin was also a trustworthy person. As long as Joachim I cooperated with him well, he would not be so mean as to leak the secret. In the end, Marin and Joachim I reached an agreement privately. Joachim I did not join hands with Frederick III to create obstacles in the negotiations, and tried his best to cooperate with Marin to disrupt the anti-Marin alliance, making the negotiations more favorable to Marin. And the reward given by Marin was that Joachim I only needed to pay half of the compensation stipulated in the negotiations. It's half, but it's not a small number. Brandenburg was defeated in this war, and nearly 15,000 prisoners of war were captured, plus Joachim I himself, the most valuable super prisoner of war. Therefore, the ransom alone exceeded 1 million gold coins. If you add a little more, the agricultural country of the electorate of Brandenburg can't take it out. Marin agreed to let the other party pay only half, which is equivalent to reducing the other party's compensation of more than 500,000 gold coins. Faced with such a huge exchange of interests, Joachim I agreed without thinking. Besides, if Brandenburg really wants to take out more than 1 million gold coins, he can't take it out even if he is beaten to death. If it's hundreds of thousands, he can still take it out after squeezing and borrowing. And Marin seems to have received hundreds of thousands of gold coins less, but in fact he didn't lose much. Why? First of all, Marin is not short of money. But the money he robbed from Wittenberg, the capital of Saxony, is enough for him to make a lot of money. As for the hundreds of thousands of gold coins exempted for Brandenburg, should they be divided equally with Lübeck and Hamburg? Marin was not worried. He only needed to take out a few 100,000 gold coins of his own from the 2 million gold coins looted from Wittenberg and auctioned in Hamburg, and give them to the two cities to settle the account. Most of those things were luxury goods that Marin did not need. He could just give them to the people in the two cities to play with, or auction them off. Secondly, of course, Marin is worried about losing out in the negotiations. The other side is already numerous and powerful. If they unite, he will definitely be very sad. Even, it can be said that the pressure is very high. After all, Marin is not ready to turn against many German princes. Marin is very worried that he will suffer a big loss in this negotiation. Therefore, he does not want to see a united opponent. If Joachim I does not cooperate with those princes in the negotiations and takes the initiative to agree to his conditions, then the other party will be very passive. Even the power they have finally gathered will punch in the air. One of the parties involved does not care. You are an outsider, what do you care about? At that time, the anti-Marin alliance will be very passive and it will be difficult to unite to deal with Marin. In addition, Marin will ask his father-in-law, the Pope, to send heavyweight representatives to suppress those religious princes, and Marin will be much better in the negotiations. At least, he will not be completely suppressed by his opponent. And this is also an important reason why Marin is willing to pay a huge price of hundreds of thousands of gold coins in exchange for Joachim I's betrayal. Moreover, the cost of these hundreds of thousands of gold coins does not require Marin to pay out real money himself. Even if the part to be divided into Lübeck and Hamburg, it only needs to be divided from the auction property worth 2 million gold coins. Those properties may not be auctioned in 1 or 2 days, or even a few months. It just so happens that Marin directly gave those to the two cities to auction slowly. And he himself will reap political benefits. In any case, the biggest threat Marin faces now is that he is politically suppressed by his opponents. Because this kind of group suppression may force Marin to harvest very little ceded land. For example, Marin originally wanted to cede 10,000 square kilometers of land, but under the suppression of the other party, he only got 1,000 square kilometers. That is definitely a big loss. If you can solve the problem of the other party's group in the negotiation, resolve this problem, and keep your own negotiation interests, a mere few 100,000 gold coins are really not a big deal. After all, land is permanent and can be passed down from generation to generation. And money, with Marin's knowledge beyond the times, it is not difficult to earn it back. Moreover, because Marin has mastered advanced agricultural technology, the land benefits are great. As long as he gains more territory, the long-term benefits will far exceed the cost of hundreds of thousands of gold coins. Therefore, in the short term, Marin will lose money in the private agreement with Joachim I. But if he gains more territory, in the long run, Marin will make money.